My name's Daver, and in this video I make a tea box out of walnut and white oak for my grandma, and I make a few mistakes along the way. Stick around to see how I did it. Welcome back, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here or you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do so now, and also hit that like button and comment on this video, because if you don't, YouTube will throw me into the deep, dark, forgotten depths of the algorithm. I'd really appreciate the help. So I wanted to make my grandma something out of wood. And I thought, hey, she's a tea drinker, let's make her a tea box. How hard could it be? The problem was I'd never really made a tea box before, but I thought, hey, the best way to learn something is to just do it. Now my plan was to make this tea box minimal, kind of have my own design aesthetic added to it while looking on the internet at other boxes as examples and inspiration. This box is gonna be narrow enough just to fit a single line of tea bags lengthwise, and you could put dividers in this box, especially if you drink multiple teas, but my grandma only drinks one tea, so I didn't need to put any dividers in this box, but if you really wanted to, you could. Now I want to be honest up front and try to keep it real on this channel. In this video, I do make a few mistakes, as one who is learning something new usually does, and you'll probably spot them. And I did my best to mention and call those out, and you might see something I did wrong that I didn't mention or call out. Now, I'm not gonna make an excuse, but I was a little pressed for time and a little stressed because this was very important to me. Now, I will say I made a couple boxes, but not a tea box like this. As I've said in previous videos, this video is meant to be inspirational or entertaining, not instructional. Don't try this at home. All that said, let's get in the build video. For this project, I decided to use white oak and walnut. Walnut was going to be the lid and the bottom, and the white oak was going to be the main part of the box. I first started with getting the white oak piece nice and square so I could start working with it to make the sides of the box. Now, since I was going to be taking a 4/4 or 1 inch piece down to about 1/4 of an inch for my sides, I decided to resaw it on my bandsaw. And I planned on having a very nice grain wrap on this box. Unfortunately, this did not go the way I wanted it to, and I wasn't getting a good straight cut. Even with the fence, my blade started wandering and pretty much ruined the cut. So I had to grab another piece of white oak and try to get some working pieces out of that, but unfortunately that meant no grain wrap for Grandma. Sorry, Grandma. I serviced my bandsaw after this and corrected the problem, but it was a hard lesson to remember to service your bandsaw before you use it. After resawing those pieces, I planed them down to their final thickness and then took it over to the table saw to rip it down to its final height of about 3.5 inches. Now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to cut up these pieces so there is kind of a continuity in the grain. I feel like I did a pretty good job. White oak has a really nice, distinctive grain, which helped me line it up as best I could. Now I'm taking it over to the router to route an 1/8 inch groove so I can put the bottom panel in, which will be a piece of walnut to contrast the box and match the lid. Then on the top, where the lid will go, I'm routing a rabbet, and it's about 1/4 of an inch down. So the lid is gonna sit in the box just a little bit below where the top of the sides are. And the next step was to cut out the sides of the box, and I'm using mitered corners for the joinery. I'm also switching out my blade and using a fine tooth blade for these cuts. Now, one thing I should note is that I've not really done this before other than one, well, maybe 2 times. I still have a lot to learn, so please don't do what I'm doing if I'm doing anything incorrectly. While I am using a miter gauge and a sacrificial piece to make these cuts, I probably should make a sled in the future. Now it was time to do a dry fit, and I will say that one of the corners did not perfectly align. Unfortunately, due to time, I had no choice but to proceed, and I will address that later on in the video. Now it was time to make the bottom panel, and I'm using walnut, as mentioned previously, which will contrast the white oak. I'm just test fitting as I plane this piece down to its final thickness to fit in the grooves on the bottom. And there we go. The next step was to cut this bottom panel down to its final dimensions. And apologies for me completely covering up what I'm doing. You'd think that I've done this before. Now I'm just dry fitting the panel in and putting the pieces around it before I start gluing things up. And a not pro tip, if you have one side that's a little snug, you can use paste wax to get this in. I was having a heck of a time with weather conditions because it's Cleveland and winter, and I was having a lot of wood movement, even though my shop is heated. Here I am sanding the insides of my box because you do not want to have to worry about that after the glue up is done. Now, since this box was going to be a gift for my grandma, I wanted to engrave my logo on the bottom because I thought it'd be a nice personal touch that she'd appreciate on this gift. And hopefully it would make her forget about the fact that I do not have a grain wrap, or at least a perfect grain wrap on this box. Again, sorry, Grandma. Now, I've been using my laser a lot to make things for my own woodworking business, especially over the holidays, and I'm still getting the hang of all the settings and things like that. But this actually caught fire a little bit, and it wasn't anything serious, but something to, be aware of when you're using a laser. Safety first, always have a fire extinguisher, and don't burn your shop down. Now it was time for every woodworker's second least favorite thing to do, and that was the glue up. I'm using the blue tape here to prevent squeeze out from getting on the insides of the box. Thank you, Jonathan Katz-Moses, for giving me this idea. He didn't do it personally. I just watched all his videos on box making, and I still have a lot to learn, clearly. Anyways, the glue I'm using is Type-On Hide Glue because it has a longer working time, and I've used this before on boxes, and it works very well, especially things that aren't going to have a lot of load or pressure or force on them. I hope this box doesn't have a lot of force on it. I don't know what my grandma would be doing where I would need stronger glue, but Hide Glue has a longer working time, and it's really good for boxes and smaller things like this where the glue up might take longer because you want to make sure that you're getting it right. Now, I'm also using blue tape on the miters to kind of hold it together like a clamping force before I actually get my box clamps on there. Just be very, very careful and be mindful of the force you're using when cleaning up the glue, because that could happen. So, good thing I'm using Hide Glue. I'm not running out of time to get this right. And just for extra squareness, I don't know if that's how you would say it, just to make sure that this is nice and square, I'm using these box clamps, corner clamps, and I'm just kind of pulling things into square as best as possible. And I'm just cleaning up the glue squeeze out as I tighten the clamps so I don't have to deal with it later. While waiting for the glue to dry, I decided to go ahead and measure the size of the lid. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to use walnut for the lid. Once I got the lid cut to the dimensions that it would be needed to fit nicely on the box, I then went and planed it down to its final thickness. While doing that, I also test fit it to determine how thick it actually should be, where it looks nice visually. This lid was going to sit directly on the top of the box in the rabbets that I cut earlier. While test fitting the lid piece, I thought it looked a little boring, so I decided to route a chamfer around the top of the lid, and I thought it gave it a really nice profile. Unfortunately, the router left some burn marks, and that's probably on me and not having the speed set correctly, but I just sanded them off by hand, and we were good to go, and it fit like a glove. After sitting overnight, it was time to remove the clamps and the tape. And I will say that the tape did help with the glue squeeze out, but there was still some left. Now, looking at the lid for way too long, I figured it probably needed some kind of handle or something that you could grab to lift it up. So I decided to use some of my off-cut white oak pieces and hand shape a handle for it. Now for this, I just kind of eyeballed it and went based on feel to make this handle piece. And then I just CA glued it on. I didn't use any activator for this because I wanted to have at least a few extra seconds to make sure that this was aligned. And I used the blue tape to kind of prevent any squeeze out, but unfortunately that didn't work. All that to say, the lid handle works perfectly. And that leaves us with every woodworker's least favorite thing to do, and that is sand. And as I mentioned before, there is a corner where the miter isn't perfect, so I'm just rounding over the edge with a screwdriver and then hand sanding to kind of sand over where the opening is. Like I said before, I've only made a box a few times, and this one is not perfect, but I am willing to continue making boxes and learn. And when you are in your woodworking journey and you're making something for a family member or a friend, they're not going to call you out for not having perfect miters. They're not like someone in my comments on these videos. They really are going to appreciate the time and the effort that you took to make whatever. So don't let that stop you. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. To finish the box, I'm using Walrus Oil's furniture butter, and I will be honest, I just started using this on my projects, and it is super easy to use, and it's all natural, and it's an awesome product. You just essentially wipe it on and let it dry for the next 24 to 48 hours, and then wipe off the excess, and it leaves a great finish. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and you got something out of it. I know I sure learned a heck of a lot. And I will have to say that in the end, the minor mistakes that I made really didn't matter. And what mattered most was my grandma really enjoyed getting this as a gift. And that means so much to me. So glad you liked it, Grandma. Hope you're enjoying some tea right now if you are watching this video. For everyone else out there, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, take care.
You made that? I gave her. You made it.
I did. You're welcome.
I love it. This is beautiful.
And it should fit all the 2 packets in there.